Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. The moment she stepped through the door, I knew something was different. She wasn't just coming home. She was arriving, like a performer stepping onto a stage. She hummed softly under her breath, a tune I didn't recognize, swaying slightly as she kicked off her heels in the hallway. And in her hands, a bouquet of flowers. That was new. Roses, pink and white, delicate and fresh. She clutched them tightly, fingers just a little too tense around the stems, as if she wasn't sure what to do with them. Gilt flowers. I watched from the couch, keeping my face neutral, my body relaxed. I sipped my drink, whiskey, no ice, and barely turned my head as she entered the living room, still humming. "Hey, baby," she cooed, voice light, overly sweet. "Thought I'd bring something nice home for us." Right. I let my eyes flick to the bouquet, taking it in slowly. They were too perfect, too intentional. Peace offering disguised as romance. Flowers, I mused, swirling the glass in my hand. "What's the occasion?" She laughed, a small, airy sound, but there was something forced behind it. Tension. "Do I need a reason to buy my husband flowers?" She smiled at me then, standing just a little too stiffly, waiting for my reaction. But I didn't give her one. I just watched. Took 7 seconds. 7 seconds before she shifted on her feet. 7 seconds before her eyes flickered across the room, scanning, searching. Something was wrong, and she could feel it. And then she saw it. Or rather, she saw what was missing. Her breath caught. It was small, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. The microsecond of hesitation. The way her fingers clenched tighter around the bouquet. The way her throat bobbed as she swallowed. It was gone. The wedding photo. For 5 years it had hung in that exact spot above the fireplace. A large, elegant frame with a black and white picture of us on our wedding day. Her in her lace gown. Me in my tuxedo. Both of us laughing, arms wrapped around each other. Perfect moment. A lie. She didn't speak, but I could hear her mind racing. Where is it? Why would he take it down? Did he notice something? Does he know? I took another slow sip of whiskey. She inhaled sharply, pasting on another smile as she forced herself to move. "Hey, did you move the wedding picture?" she asked, keeping her tone light, casual, like it was an afterthought. I looked at her then, letting the silence stretch just a little too long. Long enough for her to start doubting herself. "Oh," I said finally, tilting my head slightly. "Yeah, I guess I did." Another pause. She waited for me to elaborate, to explain, to reassure her. I didn't. Her eyes darted toward the empty wall again, that blank space where the picture had been. The absence of it was louder than any confrontation could have been. She licked her lips, shifting her grip on the flowers. "Why?" I shrugged, setting my glass down on the table with a soft clink. Felt like making some changes. Changes. The word hung in the air, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear. She tried to cover it up with another laugh, shaking her head. "Well, maybe we can pick a new spot for it together. Maybe." She forced herself to move, stepping past me toward the kitchen, but her entire body was rigid. Her mind was spinning. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how much. Yet, I leaned back in my chair, listening to her fuss with the flowers in the kitchen, the sound of running water as she filled a vase. She thought she still had control. She thought she could smooth this over. But the missing wedding photo was only the beginning. I swirled the last sip of whiskey in my glass, listening to the soft clinking of the vase as she arranged her gilt flowers in the kitchen. I could hear her steadying her breath, forcing a sense of normalcy. She was trying to convince herself that the missing wedding photo was nothing. But deep down, I knew she was wondering, how much does he know? I let my gaze linger on that empty space on the wall, the ghost of our wedding day hanging in the air. The longer I stared at it, the more bitter the memories became. The signs were always there. 3 months ago, the first crack started with her phone. I wasn't the jealous type. Never needed to be. We had a routine, a rhythm. If her phone rang while she was in the shower, I'd glance at it and tell her who was calling. No big deal. Until one night, when her phone lit up beside me on the couch. A text. Can't stop thinking about you. It wasn't saved under a name, just a number. I remember how fast she moved when she saw me looking, like she had been burned. Oh, it's just work stuff, she had laughed. Too quickly, grabbing her phone and tucking it under her thigh. You know how my boss is. I did know how her boss was. And unless he had suddenly decided to start texting his employees at 10 at night with cryptic, romantic messages, she was lying. But I let it go. For the moment. 2 months ago, the unexplained distance. She had started staying late. Meetings. So many meetings. She always had an excuse. The new project is insane. My boss is a slave driver. We're behind schedule. I would have believed her if she hadn't started acting like I was a burden. Every time I asked if she wanted to grab dinner, she was too tired. Every time I reached for her at night, she shifted away. The intimacy, the warmth, the laughter, it was being drained from our marriage drop by drop. But the biggest red flag? She had stopped arguing with me. I know how that sounds, like I wanted fights, but we always talked, debated, disagreed. We had always been passionate. Then suddenly she was just detached, agreeing to everything I said without really listening, nodding, smiling, but absent. That was when I started watching more closely, and that was when I found the receipt. 1 month ago, the proof. She had left her purse on the counter one night when she went up for a shower. I hadn't been planning on snooping, but something was telling me, look. I reached inside, pushing past her wallet, her keys, until my fingers brushed a crumpled receipt. A restaurant, a steakhouse across town, dinner for two, a $200 bill. On a night she had told me she was working late. I stared at the date, the time. 9:42 p.m. She had come home at 11:30 p.m. that night, hair damp, claiming she had grabbed drive-thru on the way back. I remember standing in the kitchen, gripping that receipt so tightly it nearly tore. And yet, I didn't say a word. Not then. I needed more. 2 weeks ago, the final nail in the coffin. Technology is a dangerous thing, especially when someone underestimates you. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't some clueless husband who would sit by and ignore the warning signs. I had installed a GPS tracker on her car. Just a small device, easy to hide, linked to an app on my phone. That Friday, when she told me she was going to a girls' night with her coworkers, I checked. The pin didn't move for hours. She wasn't at any restaurant. She wasn't at any bar. She was parked outside a luxury hotel. I felt a cold, sharp calm settle over me. This was it. The proof. I knew now, and I knew exactly how to play this. Present back in the living room. I blinked, pulling myself from the memories. In the kitchen, I heard her let out a soft breath. She must have convinced herself. I didn't know. She thought she still had the upper hand. That was fine, because the game was just beginning. I stood up, stretching, making my way toward the kitchen. She turned quickly, smiling a little too brightly as she placed the flowers in the vase. See? She said, gesturing toward them. They look beautiful. I nodded slowly, stepping closer. She smelled like expensive perfume, a scent I hadn't bought for her. I tilted my head. You know, it's funny, I said, watching her carefully. I can't remember the last time you bought me flowers. She laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear. Well, I guess I was just feeling sentimental today. Sentimental. I let the silence stretch, watching as she fidgeted. She wanted to change the subject. She was waiting for me to bring up the wedding photo, waiting to see if I would question her. I didn't. I simply leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. I ran into Greg earlier, I said casually. Her shoulders stiffened. Greg was our neighbor. She forced a smile, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. Oh, I nodded, watching her reaction. Yeah, he mentioned something interesting. She swallowed. What do you mean? I smiled. Her fingers tightened around the kitchen counter, knuckles turning white. She was nervous. Good. I leaned against the counter, watching her. letting my words settle between us like an invisible noose tightening around her throat. I ran into Greg earlier, I said again, slower this time. Her face didn't change, not immediately, but I saw it. A flicker, a quick glance to the side, like she was searching for an escape route. Oh, she said too casually. What about? I let the moment stretch, watching her fidget. She wanted me to be specific. She needed to know how much I knew before she reacted. But I wasn't about to make it easy. I shrugged. Just chatting about the neighborhood. You know Greg. Always got an eye on things. That landed. I saw the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed. The way her body tensed ever so slightly. Greg was our neighbor. Retired, mid-60s, and notoriously observant. The kind of guy who knew everyone's routines without even trying. He sat on his porch every morning with his coffee, watching the world move around him. And my wife, she had made a mistake. One I had been waiting for. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen a few times, then set it on the counter between us. Actually, I continued, keeping my voice calm. He mentioned something interesting. She stared at the phone like it was a loaded gun. What do you mean? She asked, her voice a fraction too high. I tapped the screen, playing back a voice memo. Greg's raspy voice filled the room. Hey, bud, just thought you should know. I saw Amanda getting into some guy's car last Friday night. Didn't look like an Uber. He picked her up down the block, not in front of the house. Thought it was weird. Figured you should know. The color drained from her face. She tried to cover it, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Oh my God. Greg's being nosy again? I swear I tilted my head. Where were you last Friday? She froze. And that was when I knew. She had no plan for this. She hadn't expected Greg to notice. Hadn't expected me to record him. She blinked, shaking her head. I told you. I had a girls' night with. I didn't let her finish. Who picked you up? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She was stalling, trying to come up with an answer that made sense. I let her squirm for a moment before I pushed the knife in further. Because Greg was pretty sure it was a guy. I tapped my phone again. And I have the footage. I didn't have to. There was no footage. But I had learned something in the last few months. People confess faster when they think they've already been caught. And I had just cornered her. Her breath hitched. Panic flickered in her eyes. She shook her head quickly. You're being crazy, Mark. I don't know why Greg would say that. But I stepped closer. Then say it. My voice was low, steady, cold. Say Greg is lying. Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Because she knew. If she denied it outright and then I showed her footage, she would be completely trapped. So she tried something else. The guilt card. She sighed, her expression softening. Honey, listen. She reached for my arm. I feel like you're trying to catch me in something that's not even real. I let her touch linger for a second before I pulled away. Her face fell. She knew then. This wasn't working on me, and she was running out of options. Her hand dropped, and for the first time I saw something else in her eyes. Desperation. The fear of losing control. I leaned down, picking up my phone, sliding it back into my pocket, and then I delivered the final blow. You know what's funny? I mused. Greg said something else. Her breathing hitched. I turned, heading back toward the living room. He said the guy looked familiar. I didn't look back, but I heard her exhale. A sharp, shuddering breath. She knew I had her. The trap was set. And now all I had to do was wait for her to walk into it. I settled into the couch, tapping my fingers against my phone. My mind sharp despite the whiskey I had been nursing. She hadn't followed me into the living room yet. That was good. She needed a moment to process, to realize what just happened. Greg's voice, the missing wedding photo, the mention of footage. She was losing control. I took my time. I wanted to give her the illusion that she still had a chance to fix this. And then, right on cue, I heard soft footsteps. She appeared in the doorway, composed but cautious, a mask of concern carefully arranged on her face. Mark, she sighed. taking slow steps toward me. "Can we talk?" I glanced up from my phone, raising an eyebrow. "About what?" She hesitated. I could see her working through her options. Lie? Deflect? Play the victim? She settled on sympathy. She sat beside me, just close enough to remind me of what I could lose. "I don't know what's going on," she said gently, reaching for my hand. "But I feel like there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." I nearly laughed. Instead, I let her think I was considering her words. I let the silence stretch. Then, I exhaled and leaned forward, elbows on my knees, rubbing my hands together. "A misunderstanding, huh?" She nodded quickly, hope flickering in her eyes. "Yes, I think maybe you're reading too much into things." I tilted my head. "So Greg's lying?" She froze. Her lips parted slightly, caught. She couldn't say yes because what if I really had footage? But she couldn't say no either because that would be an admission. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. So I helped her out. I sighed, shaking my head. "You know what, Amanda?" I glanced at her, letting the weight of my exhaustion seep into my voice. "I want to believe you. I really do. But I trailed off, letting frustration replace suspicion. I needed to make her comfortable. I needed to make her talk. She bit her lip, looking down at her hands. I just don't want you to think the worst of me." "Then tell me the truth." She took a shaky breath. "Here it comes." Nothing happened, Mark." She looked up at me, eyes wide, voice soft. "I swear, I didn't move, didn't react." She took it as a sign to keep going. "I was just God. I don't even know why I did it. It was just—" She let out a nervous laugh, shaking her head. "It was stupid." My heart beat steady, controlled. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against my phone, and I hit record. "Tell me," I said, my voice smooth, coaxing. "What was stupid?" She hesitated. I leaned in slightly, encouraging, reassuring, and then she cracked. "It was just harmless flirting," she said quickly, looking at me for validation. Just fun. I never thought it would go anywhere, I swear." I nodded slowly, keeping my eyes on her. Yes, I went out with him," she admitted, fidgeting with her fingers. "But I never—" "You went out with him?" I interrupted. So Greg was telling the truth. She flinched. I waited, let her drown in the silence. She sighed, defeated. "Yes, but it wasn't like that." "Like that?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean it wasn't an affair?" She hesitated. This was it, the critical moment. I could see her crumbling, but she wasn't ready to give it all up yet. So I played my final card. I pulled my phone out, pretending to scroll. "See, that's funny," I said casually, "because I have something here that says otherwise." She went still. Her breath hitched. What do you mean?" I tilted the phone slightly, just enough for her to see that the screen was open. She thought it was proof. She thought it was footage. She broke. Okay, fine," she blurted, hands flying up. "I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything." My jaw clenched. I let her words sink in. She gasped, realizing what she had just said. And then her eyes snapped to my phone, and I pressed stop. The silence was deafening. Her face drained of color as she stared at me. "Mark!" I held up the phone, showing her. A recording. Her own voice, clear as day. "Okay, fine. I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything." She reached for the phone, but I pulled it away. Her breath came fast. Her hands trembled. She knew. There was no way out of this. And yet, I saw it. That flicker in her eyes. That last-ditch effort forming in her mind. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to admit she was wrong. She was going to fight back. And that was exactly what I was waiting for. Her lips parted in horror as she stared at the phone in my hand. Her confession. Recorded. Her breath hitched, eyes darting between me and the screen. Her mind spinning as she tried to figure out her next move. "Amanda," I said, my voice cold, measured. "You just admitted it." She shook her head rapidly, scrambling for control. No, Mark, that wasn't. I hit play. Okay, fine. I made a mistake. But it didn't mean anything. Her own voice echoed through the living room, bouncing off the walls, slamming into her like a wrecking ball. She flinched. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She was cornered. There was no talking her way out of this. No gaslighting. No lies. No excuses. And then, I saw it. That split-second shift in her expression. The panic morphed into something else. Something ugly. Rage. She straightened, her breath slowing, her hands clenching into fists. And then she smirked. Smirked. I knew this was coming. I had seen it before. The moment a liar realizes they can't lie their way out, so they go for the kill instead. She wasn't sorry. She was angry that she got caught. Oh, grow up, Mark, she snapped, rolling her eyes. This little recording? She laughed, shaking her head. What do you think you're going to do with it, huh? Take me to court? Send it to my family? To my job? I didn't answer, because she wasn't done. You think anyone is going to care? She continued, voice dripping with venom. You think some shitty audio clip is going to make people take your side? She stepped closer, eyes flashing. No, Mark. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to calm down, delete that little recording, and we're going to pretend this conversation never happened. I smiled. That threw her off. She expected me to be furious, to lash out, to fight. She wasn't expecting this. Slowly, I leaned back against the couch, stretching my legs out. And why? I mused, tilting my head. Would I do that? Her smirk widened. Because if you don't, she purred, lowering the final knife, I will destroy you. I didn't move. I just let her talk. I'll tell people you've been emotionally abusive for years, that you're controlling, that you were obsessed with the idea that I was cheating, even when I wasn't. I almost laughed. She wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. She knew she had lost. So she did what cowards do. She threatened to burn everything down with her in it. She took a slow step forward, her voice silk and steel. And guess what? They'll believe me. They always believe the woman. I watched her, my heartbeat steady. I'll take half of everything, she continued, her voice sharp now. And if you even try to fight me, I'll tell the cops you threatened me, that you were dangerous, that I was scared for my life. Her smile widened. That's all it takes, Mark. One phone call, and there it was. Her final move. She thought she had me, thought I'd break, thought I'd fold under the pressure. She was about to learn something very, very important. I wasn't the one trapped. She was. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Wow, I said, tapping the phone against my palm. That's quite the little plan. Her smirk didn't waver. It's not a plan, Mark. It's reality. I met her eyes, and then I destroyed her. Funny thing, Amanda, I sighed, standing up, towering over her. I already filed for divorce. The color drained from her face. I smiled, watching the impact of my words sink in. She blinked rapidly. What? I reached into my pocket, pulling out an envelope and held it out to her. Served. As of this morning. Her hands trembled as she took it, her smirk gone, replaced with horror. I continued, my voice calm, almost amused. And as for your little story about me being abusive, I've been recording this entire conversation. Her head snapped up. You! I pulled my phone out, wiggling it between my fingers. Oh yeah, every threat, every word, crystal clear. Her breath hitched. Now, here's what's going to happen, I said, stepping closer, my voice deadly quiet. You're going to pack your shit and leave. You're going to sign the divorce papers without a fight. And you're going to walk away with whatever I decide to let you have. Her lips parted, shaking. You can't just. I can. I cut her off. And I already have. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes darting around, looking for some kind of way out. But there wasn't one. I had buried her, and she knew it. She opened her mouth again. Maybe to argue, maybe to scream, but I held up the phone, tilting my head. Say one more word, I said softly, taunting. Go on. Give me more to work with. Her jaw clenched, and then she dropped the envelope, turned, and stormed toward the stairs. I let out a slow breath, watching her disappear into our bedroom, hearing the frantic rustling of bags, drawers slamming shut. She was packing. I sat back down, placing my phone on the table, watching the empty space on the wall where our wedding photo had once hung. She thought she was going to win, thought she had power, but in the end, all she had was nothing, because she had thrown everything away. And now, she was finally feeling the weight of her own consequences. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.